Shalom, shalom.
Shalom. Erev Tov.
Hi.
Hi.
I'll start in a minute.
Okay. I get in focus.
Hi, hi. Is this Hank Yosef?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start in a little bit less than a minute. We'll start. Hi, hi. Shalom Abracha. Hi. Shalom, shalom. Okay, so we'll start. So, shalom everyone. Today is the last shiur for the year of Tafshin Pei Dalet. Now, the previous Kvere Rebbe always used to say that by us Yidden, there is no ending, meaning it's not like the year is ending and we're leaving it behind. By us Yidden, when we're here at the last Shabbos, the last week of the year, it's basically taking everything together, and Be'ezus Hashem, all the aliyahs, all the connection that we had to Hashem, we're taking with us for this coming year. So it's not like we're leaving everything behind, but we're taking it with us for this upcoming year, Be'ezus Hashem. Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz writes in his Sefer Yar is Devash, he says, I have a Kabbalah for my Rebbes, his Rebbes, that the last week, each day of the last week, we could be metaken, we could fix, we could make Be'ezus Hashem good the day that we are in. So for instance, Thursday, the last Thursday, which was today, we could be metaken, we could correct all the Thursdays from this past year. Friday, now when we're entering Friday, obviously the Erev Shabbos Kodesh, tonight, we could be masakin all the Erev Shabbosim from the whole year. And he says, so every day from the last week of the year. So we're now in very, very amazing week, a very powerful week, a week that has so much in it. Just this idea that we could be misaken, we could correct everything that we basically need to still correct from this past year. The Shabbos, which this is basically the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah, Parshas Nitzavin-vayelech. The name for the Parsha itself tells us so much, because Nitzavim means standing on one place. Vayelech is to go, which is basically two opposites. But it says in the Svarim from the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, it comes to teach us, even if a person felt or he feels like Nitzav, sometimes we feel stuck. We feel like we can't move. We can't, if it's connection, if it's davening, we feel the lack of really connecting to tefillah. If it's learning, we feel the lack of connecting to learning. If it's doing mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim, we feel this lack of connecting. Even when we feel like nitzavim one place, we should be mechazik ourselves, and we should vayelech. We should go. We should move. A person has to do a sarusa de lisata. We have to awaken, which is something that we all know. We have to awaken from below, as it says in the Zoya, and then suddenly it opens up. As we know, we have to open up a small, tiny opening, and a huge opening opens up. This is the Nitzavin-vayelech idea. Even when we feel nitzav, we feel stuck. Vayelech, go, continue going, which is really what Moshe Rabbeinu did. Moshe Rabbeinu was the last day before his istalkis, before he was passing away, before his passing. And it says, Vayelech Moshe. He doesn't stop. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't stop, which is Vayelech Moshe. Moshe goes. Moshe is constantly a goer. Even the last hour or two before he is nifter. Obviously, Moshe Rabbeinu was Moshe Rabbeinu, but it's something that we should learn from, that even those moments that we feel nitzav, we feel that we're nitzavim in one place, vayelech, go, don't give up, constantly go. This is the name of the Parsha. The Gemara says in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, famous Gemara, that why is it, and I mentioned it last week, why is it that we read the Parsha of the Toichacha in Parshas Kisavai, the rebuke in Parshas Kisavai? So Tichla Shana v'Kilaloiseha, all the Chas v'Sholem things that are not good should end, and the Tichla Shana, and it should start the year Tichla with a Ches, Ubirchaisel with Brachas. So the Be'er Mayim Chaim, he was the Chernivtzer Rebbe. He asks a very powerful question. If this is the case, in other words, if the idea of reading Parshas Kisavai before Rosh Hashanah is, so it should be Tichla Shana v'Kilaloiseha, it should end all the klolos. Wouldn't it be more suitable for this week? Why was it last week? It should be this week. It should be Nitzavin-vayelech. Why was it Kisavai? So he says something so incredible. He says, Elamai, what we see from this, that the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah is already Rosh Hashanah. In other words, the Shabbos before the week of Rosh Hashanah is like Rosh Hashanah itself. So when we say Tichla Shana v'Kilaloiseha, that the Kloloi should end, it's Dafka Kisavai last week, because this week Nitzavin-vayelech is already Eschalta, that's the way he calls it. It's the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. And he quotes the famous Zoya. The Zoya says, Kol berchoyin de le'ele v'tata, all the brachas that are from above and from below, all the brachas that come, everything biyoyme shevi and talyam. Everything is dependent in the Shabbos Kodesh. So everything starts with Shabbos Kodesh. All the brachas from the week starts with Shabbos Kodesh. So he says, if this is the case, so Rosh Hashanah, which is the middle of the week, So the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah has within all the koiches, everything that will come in Rosh Hashanah starts with Shabbos Kodesh. Amazing, frightening word. So a word from the Heilige Be'emam Chaim. So he says that Shabbos, Nitzavin-vayelech, is basically already a schauta, a beginning to the Heilige days of the Yomim Noraim of Rosh Hashanah. And that's why Tich L'Shana V'Kilul Yisrael is last week and not this week, because this Shabbos is already the beginning of the Heilige Rosh Hashanah. The Heilige Chavetz Chaim, which is Yortzeit, is tonight. As we know, his Yortzeit is Chav Dalad Elul. Zchusa Yogin Oleinu Val Kol Yisrael. His chus should be Megan on us and the Galz Klal Yisrael for Hatzlacha, for Bracha, and for Shmira, for everything that we need. The Heilige Chavetz Chaim, once Rosh Hashanah, before Tkiyas Shoifa, he spoke to the people in the Beis Medrash in Radin, and he said the following. He said, if a person is not nisoirer, if a person doesn't become awakened on Rosh Hashanah, if he doesn't become awakened to a dveikus, to tshuva, to become a better person, he said he's like a wealthy man, and he said a mashal, a wealthy man that had a very fancy palace. He put in so much money, invested millions and millions of dollars in this beautiful mansion, and there was a fire that broke out in this mansion, and he basically was still doing whatever he was doing. The way the Chavetz Chaim said, he was still sleeping. People were knocking on his door and said, Rabbi Yid, your mansion is on fire, wake up. And he barely moved, he barely did anything. And people were screaming, water, water, we got to extinguish this fire. And this wealthy guy, he basically didn't really react. Says the Heilige Chavetz Chaim, on Rosh Hashanah, we are millionaires. We have the koiches that we are able to daven in a way that a whole year we don't have this koyach. The koyach hatfilah that we have on Rosh Hashanah, says the Heilige Chavetz Chaim, is beyond that we can even comprehend. And if a person sleeps throughout Rosh Hashanah, he says he is like this wealthy man who, when his mansion, when his palace was on fire, he stayed asleep and he didn't basically react. He didn't do anything, and he lost all of his money. He says this is the way we need to have the hashkafa, the way that we should see what is Rosh Hashanah. This is Rosh Hashanah. We now have the ability, the koyach, that we could, with the koyach hatfilah, change so many things. There was a Yid, I don't know if I mentioned this, there was a Yid that a few weeks ago, he lost a Yid in Eretz Yisrael, I forgot his name, he lost his son a few weeks ago, Rahman al-Islam, a Yid in Bnei Brak. He lost his son. His son was a 13-year-old bacha that was bar mitzvah a few months ago. And Rahman al-Islam, he had some infection. The doctors didn't know exactly what it was. And Rahman al-Islam, he was nifta, Hashem Yerachim. This father, he's a businessman, but he's obviously a very chashuv person. He wrote a letter to Klal Yisrael in the Shiva. He said, and he wrote the following. He said, I don't have the letter in front of me, but this is the tamtas, this is the idea what he wrote. He says, if we would have known last Rosh Hashanah that our Chaimke, would Rahman al-Islam pass away, how much more koiches would we have invested in our tefillah last Rosh Hashanah? Unfortunately, we didn't have the seichel, and we didn't put in this koiches the way we should have. He said, Klal Yisrael, I beg you, we have the koiches that we are able to change decrees, to be mevatel dinim, and to bring rachmim, to bring Mashiach. Let's have seichel, and let's not lose the opportunity of davening this Rosh Hashanah that should change the status of everything in the world, which we need so much rachmei shemayim. It's self-explanatory. We don't have to explain it, that we need so much rachmei shemayim, that we should have the seichel he wrote, and we should daven in a way that we should see ourselves, that we could now change chas v'chalila, big gezeres, and we could be mevatel it. The Chiddushei Harim, Heilige Chiddushei Harim, he writes the following. He says, obviously, we have no idea of the gadlus of the Avos and Imois. The Avos and Imois, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Heilige Avos, Kedoshei Elyonim, Malachi Elokim, they were huge. We have no idea who they were. We cannot comprehend. We're so far from who they were. The Heilige Imois, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, the Kedusha was beyond. What do we see, says the Chiddushei Harim? Chazal teach us in Masechtes Rosh Hashanah that Sarah and Rachel, these two Imois, the Gemara emphasizes on, the two Imois, Leah and Rachel, they changed the status of being an Akara through Tefillah in Rosh Hashanah. Through the Tefillah in Rosh Hashanah, even though they shouldn't have had children. Sarah, as we all know, shouldn't have had children. She was an Akara. Rachel, we know she was an Akara. So these two Heilige Imois, they shouldn't have had children. They changed the status when? Tefillah in Rosh Hashanah, says the Chiddushei Harim. Says the Chiddushei Harim, if this is by by Sarah and Rachel, these two Heilige Imois, who are the mamis of Klal Yisrael, who through them the entire Yiddish Kinderlach are here till today, because of their Kedusha. They needed Rosh Hashanah to change the status, to change who they be'etzem were, who they were Akaros. How much more so do we need to have Seichel, says the Chiddushei Harim, and take this opportunity of using Rosh Hashanah in a way of basically being able to change certain things, certain gezeres, and be mevatel dinim, and bring chesed and rachmim on the world. What an amazing thought this is. It's so simple, but it's so powerful and profound that the way he brings it out, that the two imohos needed Rosh Hashanah. How much more so do we need Rosh Hashanah to change the status and to be able to be mevatel gezeres? There's a famous quote from Chazal. The Chazal say, Kol mechish v'loy mechish rosh. Kol mechish means a person has so many different things that are painful. Physical pain, we're talking. The simple understanding of the Gemara is physical pain. Says the Gemara, every mechish, every pain is tolerable to a certain extent. But the mechish, when someone has a headache, that is already beyond. That's something that a person it's very difficult to deal with. So anything we could tolerate, so to say, but not a mechish rosh when we have a headache. Says the Slonim Rebbe, the Beis Avram Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh L'Varacha, says as follows. He says we could take these words and we could teach it into Rosh Hashanah. He says, Kol mechish. Every day in a person's life is very crucial and very important. And, the way a person reacts or interacts day by day is very, very important. Mechish. A person is very sensitive. Mechish, the way he sees it is sensitivity. We're all sensitive to every day in life, to so many different things that come our way, how to struggle, how to deal with it, and so far. So, but he says, don't forget, V'loy mechish rosh. Rosh is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is beyond. Every move that we do on Rosh Hashanah is so powerful. Just to a little bit to explain what he's saying, let me add a word from Reb Pinchas Karitza. The Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, Reb Pinchas Karitza says, we know a lot of Yidden have a minig that they wouldn't eat anything sour in Rosh Hashanah. Minig by Klal Yisrael, we don't eat sour in Rosh Hashanah. Now, obviously, it goes hand by hand with what we're saying the whole time, that Rosh Hashanah is such a important, powerful, sensitive day that we have to be very careful. But the Reb Pinchas Karitza says a very interesting reason why we don't eat sour on Rosh Hashanah. He says because when a person eats something sour, he makes a sour face. When you eat sour, it's that's the reaction that we have. We have a sour face. On Rosh Hashanah, we don't want to have a sour face. We want to have a smile, and we want to be positive, and we want to have only positive action, the way our body movements are, and azay weiter. Amazing. So it's not eating sour because the face of a person turns sour. Ad kedei kach. That's how sensitive Rosh Hashanah is with everything going on, and Rosh Hashanah basically v'loy meichesh rosh. Rosh Hashanah is a day which the sensitivity is beyond. That's why the Moir V'Shemesh writes, we have 48 hours in Rosh Hashanah, which is the gematria of Moyach. Moyach Memches is 48. He says, Moyach means our Moyach, our Seichel, our brain. He says we have to put in our Moyach, our Seichel, our thoughts in the 48 hours of Rosh Hashanah, that the 48 hours of Rosh Hashanah should be in a way that we should, Be'ezras Hashem, hope that the entire year would be a gewaldige, positive, good, geschmacke, heilige year of Mashiach and v'chulu v'chulu. So the Memches Shois of Rosh Hashanah is mamish beyond. The Heilige Baal Latanya writes in a letter, he wrote a letter to his Hasidim, and he said, now just to appreciate just to give a little background regarding the Baal Latanya. Now we know that in Chabad, they had long mamorim, very deep mamorim, that the Rebbes used to say. A maimer, famous, we all know the maimer, and the maimer was very, very deep. Every Yom Tiv, and most Shabbosim of the year, the Heilige Baal Latanya would give very deep mamorim. The only time on a Yom Tiv that he didn't was Rosh Hashanah. And he would say that Rosh Hashanah rather take out a Sefer Tehillim and say Tehillim over and over, Chaparain, as much Tehillim as you could. Tehillim is the thing to do on Rosh Hashanah, said the Heilige Baal Latanya, and that's why I don't give a maimer. So now going back to, so this is the way he saw Rosh Hashanah, that you should dafke Chaparain as much as you could with saying Tehillim, and he felt that it's more important than saying a deep maimer, in which he used to say all the time. So he wrote to his Talmid, to his Hasidim, I want you to keep in mind two things in Rosh Hashanah. A, what I just said, which is to say as much Tehillim as possible. B, to speak as little as possible. Don't be nizam et dvarim b'Tehillim. Put in more effort in not speaking dvarim b'Tehillim on Rosh Hashanah. These were the two things that he told his Hasidim to focus on, saying Tehillim, meaning besides all the tefillas that we say, but to say Tehillim and to be focused on the least that you need to talk. Don't talk Devarim B'Tehillim. And he said, why? He said, because if a person would know how precious every moment of Rosh Hashanah is, he would chaparain as much as possible. So that this is basically going back to the idea that we spoke before, that the sensitivity, the importance, and the koyach that we have in Rosh Hashanah. So this is basically what the Baal Latanya taught. There is a michtav, a letter from the Magid HaGodl of Mezrich, which the Magid HaGodl of Mezrich wrote this letter to his Chasidim, to his Talmidim, and he wrote a long letter, but I'll just take out the tamtzes, the idea, which is something that we could take out for this upcoming Heilige Rosh Hashanah. He writes as follows. He says, people usually become very inspired when the Baal Tefillah are singing the piyutim, the additional parts of the tefillah that we don't have a whole year. So all these additional add-ons, which is the piyutim, which we don't have usually throughout the year, people are very inspired, and usually the Baal Tefillah are very into it, and it awakens its moider people. So obviously it's a chashuva thing, but he says people don't chap that the tefillah that we do every single week, that we do every Shabbos, which is the Tehillim of Psika de Zumra, of Psika de Zimra, which we say every Shabbos. The tefillah that we say every Shabbos, whatever we do usually, he says those psukim in Tehillim are so powerful beyond we could even imagine. So he writes to his Talmidim and he said, obviously all these piyutim are very kadosh, heilig, but I want you to put an emphasis on the simple and the psika de zimra that we say every Shabbos, to put in effort over there. And he says, if psika de zimra, if all the parts, which is up to Hamelech, which is when the chazan stands up and he starts screaming Hamelech, if everything till there you just zoom through and you're not putting in any thoughts and any heart into that, he says it's almost like rushing into the palace with dirty clothing, with all fashvitzt, and without respect to a king. He says fakert. He says you got to put in the right koyach, the right energy, the right kavana into all these psukim before Hamelech. So when you come to Hamelech, after all these psukim, after Heilige Nishmas, the Hamelech is said in a way that it should be said, and the effect that it has is obviously the effect that it should have. We know that Rabbi, I don't know if everyone knows, but now it's quite famous. Rabbi Biderman is very into this idea of saying Tehillim twice on Rosh Hashanah, the first night Rosh Hashanah. He brings a whole bunch of stories that happened the last few years. The first, when people said twice Tehillim, which is not an easy thing to do, twice Tehillim on the first night of Rosh Hashanah, he said a lot of people, what they do, they make Tehillim mechulik, they divide it into parts. They do the divided Tehillim, and they divide it amongst people to do it twice Rosh Hashanah night. And he says, this is written actually in a sefer from a few hundred years ago. The name of the sefer is Binas Yisascha. And the sefer Binas Yisascha writes the following. He says, there is 150 kapitlach in Tehillim. When you do the Tehillim 150 times 2, so you have 300 kapitlach. He says 300 is the same gematria like kaper, chav pei reish. Chav pei reish, chav is 20, pei is 80, reish is 200, which is 300. He says that when you do the Tehillim twice, Rosh Hashanah night, that's what he says, Rosh Hashanah night, it has a gewaldige impact, has a gewaldige koyach, and it brings kapara, and it brings all good to Zachin. So it goes back to basically what the Baal HaTanya said, what was mentioned before from the Baal HaTanya, but just in a bissel of a different, the first night. I'll share another 2 or 3 verts, and then we'll finish. There is a pasuk in this week's Parsha, which is a pasuk that we all know. But the Chassam Sofer, he takes the pasuk and he says a very interesting thought on the pasuk. So it says like this: Atem Nitzavin-vayelech kulchem l'fnei Hashem Elokeichem, and then the pasuk says Rosheichem, Sheftechem, Ziknechem, V'chol Ish Yisrael. And then the next pasuk says, I'm just opening up a chumash. The next pasuk says the following. Just a second. It says like this. It says, It's actually a few psukim later. So it says, Ki pasuk yudalit. Ki. So the basically the bris, the covenant, the bris, the agreement that was made that Moshe Rabbeinu, as we all know, brought Klal Yisrael into this bris, that we all have arvis, we have a responsibility of one another, that a person called Yisrael arevim zelozeh, which Moshe Rabbeinu felt for a very important thing to establish before he passed away. And as the Chaim HaKadosh explains, because the only way that we Yidden are still here after so many years of going through so many different hardships and exile in Golos is because one Yid cares for another Yid. That's the way we are here, because we have this arvis, we care, we put our hearts into each other. That's the way we have this koyach. So so then the pasuk says that this agreement applies not only to the generation that is now during times of Moshe. It applies to the people who are here now. Also with the generations that are not here, which according to Rashi, it refers to the generations to come. Meaning this idea of arvis, of responsibility of on one another, it applies for all generations, everlasting, at soif kal adoris, to the end. But the Chassam Sofer says something so profound and so mamash hafli. He says like this. First, he brings a medrash. The medrash says that we all know that when a person marries off a child, the parents from Shemayim come to be by this grandchild's chasana, by the chuppah. We all know this is a very famous thing, and it's a Zohar. The Zohar says that they chase, that's the way the Zohar says. The grandparents are chased out of Gan Eden when the grandparents are chased out when a grandchild gets married. That's what it says. But it says the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer says that there's a medrash that on Rosh Hashanah the same thing happens. On Rosh Hashanah, wherever the children are davening, the neshamas of the grandparents are there to help that the kinderlach should have a gute gebenchtiyah. So we have grandfathers, grandmothers, all with us in shul, helping us to be ma'oret, to awaken the rachmanis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what the Chassam Sofer says. So he says, the Gemara says we don't say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because Sifrei Chaim and Sifrei Meisim Psuchim, the books of Chaim of life and the books of Meisim of death is open. How could we say Hallel? So the simplistic understanding is that the judgment, if we would stay alive or we won't, is in Rosh Hashanah. And how could we say Hallel? Says the Chassam Sofer, there's some very deep thinking going on in this Chazal. He says like this. He says the David HaMelech says in Tehillim, the Mesim are not able to thank Hashem. A dead person doesn't have the ability of praising Hashem. This is only people who are alive. The koyach of praising Hashem is only for us people that are alive. So it says like this. He says, why don't we say Hallel and Rosh Hashanah? Because Sifrei Chaim is Sifrei Meisim. Sifrei Meisim doesn't mean Meisim for us. It means the Meisim, even the Tatis and the Zaydis are together with us while we are judged. The Meisim, the previous generations are with us. How can we say Hallel? Because they're there and they can't say Hallel. So we can't do that. That's the Chassam Sofer. So he says, this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was hinting. He says, as this bris, meaning the achrayis, the responsibility that we have on one another, is something that even the ovois in Shemayim, they are thinking about us and they're davening for us, that we should basically be able to continue and to flourish and to raise our children, raise them as erlich yidden. So he says, as hashiyeshnoi poi, both the people who are here now alive, as hasheneni poi, the grandparents that are already passed away, that are with us, helping us, davening for us, that we should be able to have whatever we need. And this is what happens in Rosh Hashanah, says the Heilige Chassam Sofer, that we have our grandparents and our fathers in Shemayim being with us in Shul, davening for us, that we should be zoiche to have a good gebench Diyar. My bracha to all of us is that we should have the seichel, we should have the understanding, appreciation, what Rosh Hashanah is all about. We should be able to use this Shabbos Kodesh in a way that the Be'er Mayim Chaim explains it, which is a beginning of Rosh Hashanah. We should appreciate that every day now, and like the Yaris Devash says, every day now could correct the entire year. We should appreciate what Tehillim means in Rosh Hashanah, what davening means in Rosh Hashanah, and we should all be zoiche to a Shnaz Geula v'Yeshua, that this year, hoping even before Rosh Hashanah, but if Iluloi Zechinu, it should be the last year in Golus, and it should be a year of only simchis, only gesund, and we should, every year should be safe in any place where they are, and we should be zoiche, taksiva v'achsime toiva, together with Mashiach Tzidkenu b'korev mamash b'mheira b'yameinu amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Kol tov.
Shabbat shalom.
Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Gimad v'chatima tova.
Amen. Ksiva chsime toiva, kol tov.
Beautiful.
Kol tov, be well. All the best.